Hi, I'm Daniel Kiss.
And I'm Sal Cosenza.
And welcome to Abstract Essay! Abstract Essays created to empower artists like us. Don't you think, Mr. Sal?
I do think you're an artist. I don't know what I am, but
Yes, you are.
are we
That-
are we allowed to call ourselves artists? I guess
I,
we could, right?
I think so. Yes,
I
I am an
always think
artist.
about that.
Yes,
I'm
we
like,
deserve it.
yeah, you're right. We're heroes for what we're doing. No, just
We deserve it to call an artist because we are doing something good to the world.
well, yeah, and we react, right? We react in our own way. That's the beauty of art in all its forms.
Yes.
That's why we're always encouraging you all out there to pursue your creative exploration, your creative desires.
Yes. People, speaking of art, Mr. Sal also an author. Can you plug in your book, Mr. Sal?
Oh, I'd be happy to, Daniel.
Yes.
Yeah, so my book is called, you could see it, I think, on the screen right now, right? It's called
Yes.
Manhattan, The Rising War. It came
Yes.
out June of last year. It's already coming up on almost 1 year anniversary, but it's still on the Amazon bestseller list.
Yes.
It's never
Congratulations.
been taken off of that, so I'm particularly blessed and happy, and I hope it keeps
Continuing.
people keep reading it.
Yes, Mr. Sal, congratulations.
Thanks.
Hoping for the third, second, fourth, and fifth book. Please
I'm
create
working on
more books.
things. I'm
Yes.
working on things. I'll say that. The paintings right now, I've got ideas in the drawer, but I've
Yes.
got a couple of book ideas that I'm really happy with. So I'm pursuing one really strongly right now, but it's difficult. It's like
True.
you got to be
Busy.
totally. It's like you have to check off everything, at least in my mind psychologically. I have to check off all sorts of boxes and then say, all right, it's a go. Let's do it. So I'm
Yes.
almost there.
You're almost there. That's how Mr. Sal organizing everything. But before we go on to your exciting and magnificent paintings, I want to plug in my Book 101 review. Please do listen to my Book 101 review, people. My feature author of the month of March, award-winning and best-selling author, Miss Angela Henry. So our first episode is done already. I already published, so please listen to it or watch it
Yes.
on Spotify or whatever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Sal, with no further ado, I will do the drum roll.
Uh-oh. Let me see if I get it. I never get it. Oh no.
Yes, one more.
Oh. Enter
Oh,
picture.
yes,
Enter picture in picture automatically.
you
I don't
did
know
it.
what that means.
You did it. You did it.
Oh, allow this time. I don't know. Okay, can you see the painting?
Yes,
It's a
indeed.
red background. Okay.
Amazing painting.
All right. So, for those who have stuck it out with us for the last like 5 episodes,
Yes,
we've reached the end of the Domestic New York collection.
series.
So these are the final 11 installments, and I think they're, I don't want to say the best, but they're the most personal, the most deep. These are the ones that I did when I was living in New York. So they have, I think, an extra sort of flavor to them. And so each one of these last 11 you're going to see, each has a poem. I'm not gonna read every poem to you, Daniel.
Yes. No.
As much as I
I
want to, I'm not going to because it'll take 4 hours.
I have
Um,
Mr. Sal, I have another podcast about that, abstract poetry. So you can
oh,
come and be my guest on abstract poetry and let's talk about your poetry.
okay. Well, I'm no poet and I don't know it, but I tried poetry and I had fun with them. But
Yes.
okay, so each one of these paintings is 20 inches by 20 inches. And the idea behind them was to create a sort of concept album, right? So I don't know, Daniel, have you heard that term concept album before?
No, enlighten me, please.
So it's
What this
like
all about?
when an album is composed of different songs that sort of tell the same overall story. So Frank Sinatra was
Yes,
famous for creating concept albums. There's a famous Paul McCartney and Wings album called Band on the Run,
yes.
and that's a concept album. Green Day, more
I
recently
like
has
Green Day.
created concept albums. So it's kind of like every song. It's not really a single. It's more part of a chain, you know. It tells an overall story. So I was pursuing that, and then I was also thinking about back in my when I used to do like Catholic Mass. I used to go to Mass. You would see the stations on the cross, and each one was sort of a similar size, depicting a different part of the crucifixion. Um, so I had all of that in the back of my mind as I was pursuing these last 11 pieces. And I also just needed to kickstart my art career when I was living in New York. And so I thought, I'm going to send this domestic New York series off. I'm going to end it in the city that inspired it in the first place. So I really put a lot of extra effort, I think, into each one of these. Um, I bring some of the characters back from the previous set of paintings, but it's mainly focused on this on again, off again relationship that the Empire State and Chrysler Building are having. And so it's a story really of a romance that becomes a breakup and a really dark breakup. And then at the end, the sort of bonus track is the final painting. And that's sort of like an optimistic, I always think of it as like a single, like another song that drops, that sort of ends optimistically. And I was going through it. Some of these are autobiographical, so you'll see a lot of personal touches added to these pieces, and if I remember to call them out, I will. So I don't know. Should we just dive in?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Go
All
ahead,
right.
Mr. Sal.
So the first in the series I created in 2015, and it's called Domestic New York, A Towering Romance. And I wanted, this sort of iconic silhouette, sort of, this skyline of a painting. So I've got you know, this towering romance happening between Empire State and Chrysler Building. You have the Zeppelin there. You've got searchlights. You've got the city below, sort of as like a very theatrical set piece. So it is still very set piece like. I know in the past episodes we talked about how this domestic New York idea of each one is in a sort of sitcom like a set design, right? And so this one is almost very Broadway like, right? Very theatrical in its composition. um, and there's a few little, I guess, double entendres, is that what you would call it?
Yes.
The location of the Zeppelin, does it have to be there? Maybe not, right? But it's suggestive. I don't care, right? And
It's suggestive.
it doesn't necessarily have to be at that location, but it is, whatever. But this is, Empire State and Chrysler unabashedly in love with each other,
Oh,
right? And so
wow.
their bodies are contorting in such a way that is, or almost reminiscent of like a Gone with the Wind poster from the 1930s and 40s, sort of old Hollywood style, old Broadway, old Hollywood. So I think it was a way to just kick this last leg of the domestic New York journey off with a bang, right? So where do I go from there? I go back to I sort of
Nice.
revisit some memorable aspects of the series at large with these last 11 paintings. So this one is sort of a throwback to the film noir the film noir days, right, of the series, where I had a few of them in black and white. wearing the fedoras and whatnot. So here you have um, that tradition sort of happening once more, sort of one final time actually. Here's Empire State Building with a big stogie in his mouth, right? The sort of the ringleader of this trio of buildings. And by the way, um, the three buildings here are positioned, and the hats have all been selected based on a still frame from one of my favorite Frank Sinatra movies, and actually a Rat Pack film called Robin and the Seven Hoods. It's a musical from 1962, I want to say,
Mm.
maybe 63. But there's a particular shot with Sinatra at the center, and then Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin flanking him. And so I took that pose. I took those three poses that they were, uh, you know, inhabiting, and added and applied them to these three buildings. Um, the building on the left is 40 Wall Street in Lower Manhattan. The building on the right is Rockefeller Center, the GE building, which is now actually called the Comcast building. But and then I have, a $20 tip on the bar, on the counter. I have, napkins and various beverages, sort of in this 1 point perspective, terminating to the center of the painting, which is Empire State Building. So it's and the name of this one is Domestic New York, Take Care of That Thing, which, it's like a classic Brooklyn sort of cliche. It's like, oh, did you take care of the thing? Yeah. Which thing? The thing in Jersey. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
So that's the name of this one. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, so this one is called Domestic New York. The Song is Ended.
Oh,
And this
nice.
is so this one is sort of getting into this idea of, you know, the relationship between the Chrysler and Empire State Building is on the rocks.
Mm.
And so Empire State is sort of forced to sit and ruminate and think pensively about what the hell happened to him. And then there's a note on the bottom left, and that note says, Empire, I wish there were another way, but I'm afraid my leaving is the only one. Goodbye, Chrysler B. So that's kind of the breakup note. Um, there's a rose, a dead rose, and the rose sort of becomes a common thread throughout these last 11 paintings. It pops up here and there. The reason for that, by the way, is the state flower of New York is the rose. And I
Mm.
was like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense, right? So I added the rose. This orangey sort of suede chair that you're looking at, and
Yes.
this backdrop with the window mullions, with the blue light, it almost looks like a
Blue.
prison. It almost looks
Mm-hmm.
like an abstracted jail. So I took that. I basically copy pasted that set piece with the couch
Yes.
from another Frank Sinatra uh, a
Movie.
music video, sort of a
Um.
music montage that he recorded in, again, like the late 60s, the mid to late 60s, for one of his music specials. And so in that, he's singing a lot of torch songs, he's smoking, and he's surrounded by this sort of environment, including that beautiful chair. So I sort of again I sampled, right, from a lot of different sources. So here's yet another sort of Sinatra reference baked in, but of course Empire State Building is replacing Sinatra in the chair. Um, Next one. All right, so that was
Next.
2015. Okay, this one is the next in the order. So now I sort of, as we get through the rest of these paintings, it sort of traces what's going on in the mind of Empire State Building uh, because of the breakup, and then what's going on in Chrysler Building's head. So this one is called Domestic New York, the Fragoli let me see. Let me just get the cursor down. The Frigoli delusion.
Yes.
So, do you have any idea what that means, Daniel? Frigoli delusion?
No. Enlighten me.
I did not either. So, but until I did some research. So, my favorite one of my favorite movies, and we talked about this in episodes prior, is the Alfred Hitchcock movie called Vertigo,
Yes.
and it's one of the most, you know, it's an epic film, right? It's like always on the list of like the greatest films ever. Um, but there's a scene where Jimmy Stewart's character is obsessed with Kim Novak, and he sees her everywhere, right? And that happens. I don't know if you've ever been in a, a romantic relationship, Daniel, that just went south, but or even not, even like when you're into somebody and you start to like see that person everywhere, right? And maybe this just happens to me, but um
It happens to everyone, Mr. Sal.
okay, good. Oh, thank goodness. But it's this idea of, people you see on the street, like from a distance, they could be that person that you are thinking about. So that's called Frigoli delusion, right? It's named after someone named Frigoli, who was probably like a, philosopher or a theorist or something, um, or psychiatrist, right? But it's this concept of seeing people, even though they're not that person that you think they are.
Hmm.
So in this case, I'm taking another set piece. I'm taking from the movie Vertigo, and I'm taking those ideas from Vertigo, where Jimmy Stewart starts to see Kim Novak everywhere. But in this case, I have Empire State Building looking around the restaurant, and every single character, whether they're sitting down, whether they're at the bar, they look like Chrysler Building, right? And so he's sort of in this trance. He's in this Frigoli delusion where he's tricked himself to believe that every person around him, every building around him is the Chrysler Building. Um, but the truth is in the mirrors. So if you look in the way back here in the center, almost in the center of the painting, you can see there's a mirror here, and there's a Chrysler Building looking at the mirror at the reflection, but the reflection is revealing a different building altogether. So in reality, these are not the Chrysler Building, right? So it's a psychological trick that Empire State Building is on, if that makes sense. Does that make any sense?
Makes sense.
Okay.
Makes sense, Mr. Sal. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So we're witnessing a character, Empire State Building, sort of falling deeper and deeper into delirium, right? Like he's like the breakup is hitting him very hard, let's say. Right. And then I'm using another Hitchcock trick was he used complementary colors. So the red wallpaper juxtaposed with this green necklace that Chrysler Building's wearing is meant to focus your eyes. Like we have a tendency to focus on green if the red was a backdrop, and vice versa. If green was the backdrop and I had a red element in the foreground, you would focus on that red element. So there's a lot of things going on in this piece. So then, okay, so then where do I go from there? We go to domestic New York, the humanity of clowns.
Yes.
And so this is I think the only painting in the domestic New York series. Remember, I did 57, I think 58, 57 of those in this series. This is the only one that's a self-portrait. So that's supposed to be me, uh, dressed up as a clown, as Pagliacci, the sad clown. So, living in New York for I think, when did I move there? 2012. This came out 2016. So for 4 years, I was in New York, and I think the more I was living there, at times I felt like I was a just like a clown. I can't really explain it, um, but New York does that to you. I love New York, and but it does every so often cause you to be self-reflective and introspective and question who you are, right? And so I felt that, I met a lot of really beautiful people, and I met some people who maybe I felt took advantage of me in one way or another, or maybe I took advantage of them, right?
Yes.
But in either case, I felt like I was a sort of a performer or a clown. So I sort of took that metaphor, and ran with it. And so here you have me applying the makeup to myself, right? You have the clown nose on the table. You got um, the little makeup with the brush here. You have a magazine on the table called Coulrophobia. Coulrophobia, Daniel, is a fear of clowns.
Oh, wow.
I did not know
Thank
that.
you. Thank you
Yeah,
for sharing the info.
I'm not. Are you afraid of clowns? I'm not, but I don't know, because
I'm
that's a
not.
big. Okay, I know people
Yeah,
are,
that's
right?
for it, yes.
I never understood it, but I guess it makes sense. This element here, this triangle design on a towel here, that's taken from yet another Sinatra album cover, this time Only the Lonely. If you Google that album cover, you'll see it's a picture of Sinatra as a clown. He's got clown makeup, and this triangular design is behind him. You have a box of props here, because a clown needs props. And then I have sort of peering through the red and white striped curtain, like a clown, like a circus tent, right? You have St. Patrick's Cathedral and other buildings and Empire State sort of like peering in. And I remember that was a metaphor for the city sort of, my relationship with New York at the time was, it's kind of like the city's there, the city's observing my role, my clowniness, if you will. Um, I don't know. So it was a very sort of interesting self-assessment that I think I was pursuing with this particular painting. And then the roses continue. So here's a vase of dying roses. So these have a sense of melancholy to them, a lot of these paintings. That's why, they're probably more personal than the previous like 50 or so. Um, okay, this one. So what's going on with Empire State Building at this point in this story? So Chrysler Building left him, and this one's called Domestic New York, the Cliffhanger. And so
Wow.
he's cliffhanging off of, again, the Chrysler Building, the gargoyle of the Chrysler Building, but this time it's a full scale version of the building. Um, and he's not, you know, he's not gonna jump, but he's thinking about it, or at least he's looking down. uh, and again, these got dark. I had I had some lovesick moments, let's call them, like you know dating moments that
Wrong.
went went wrong. And so, what am I gonna do as a painter? I'm gonna memorialize those in my paintings, right? Like, of course, right?
Those
It
are
was
what
a
those are the days.
Yeah, right. And it's a form of therapy. This is why art is therapy, because it helps you work through whatever problems you're having.
Yes.
So again, I I injected some of myself into this situation that we're looking at here. So you have, and the background here, the backdrop is based off of a Batman Returns still film still. Batman Returns is the Batman movie that's set during Christmas time, and it's a wintry, sort of beautiful, gloomy version of Gotham City, which I always loved. So
Nice.
I wanted to sort of capture the spirit of that version of Gotham as my backdrop. So this one's called The Cliffhanger. So at least the good news is Empire State Building does not jump.
Yes.
Um, However, he's sort of still falling apart. And in this next one, Domestic New York, The Other Side, it's called, you have Empire sort of somehow, you know, getting by, right? He's back in his apartment. The laundry is piling up. He's got trash. He's got a pizza box and some, looks like some, is that vodka? He's got a he's got a banana peel. The trash needs to go out, but he hasn't taken it out. Um, there's Chinese food like takeout right on the top of the dresser over there. And if you look at Empire State Building, he looks pretty bad, right? Like his bricks, his stonework is falling off. You could see some of his interior floors and columns exposed. So, he's kind of worse for wear. He's surviving, but he's not doing very well psychologically and physically, right? And so here's another use of the mirror as sort of, you know, a truth teller,
Yes.
or the mirror as a reminder. That's why I call this one Domestic New York, the other side, because he's looking at the other side of his life or reality. So in the mirror, you see everything is hunky dory. There's a yellow sign saying happy anniversary. You've got Chrysler and Empire sort of embracing each other, looking at their reflection. There's a hat on the rack. There's jewelry. The room itself is composed, but then when you look at the current reality, that anniversary poster is now draped, is sort of forgotten on the top of the dresser, and as I mentioned, the laundry's piled up, right? The trash is out, and Chrysler Building is nowhere to be found, right? So again, it's very sort of depressing, right? But so that was 2016. So then
2016.
Yes. So then later on in 2016, so Empire State, we kind of zero in on him now, and he actually decides to improve himself, right? That was sort of his very low point, was when he's looking in the mirror. So what does he do next? He goes to a shrink, right? So this one's called Domestic New York Shrink Wrapped. Uh,
Nice.
and and I based so my roommate and one of my dear friends, he hates that term dear friend. So I say it anyway. He was a dear friend, but his name is Justin,
Uh,
and Justin was and is he was studying forensic psychology and criminal justice. He was my roommate, one of my roommates. And
mhm.
so when I was painting these paintings, it was in our New York apartment, usually in the living room or in my little closet of a bedroom. But I remember consulting with Justin on this one, asking him, what would a therapist office have in it, right? And so these envelopes would be there. Here's a Rorschach deck, like the Rorschach exam. I
Yes.
think I don't think I'm pronouncing it right, but it's but it's that thing. They're like symmetrical, and you're supposed to look at them and associate the image with something that pops into your head. Um, and I remember Justin tested us once, me and my other friend and roommate, Tamam, and we saw some interesting things in those cards. So I have a Rorschach deck here. I have a certificate here, a therapy, like this is a certified therapist. Here you have a window looking out onto the street below. here's the therapist himself sitting in a very comfy chair with his notepad, slightly balding at the top. And then, you have Empire State Building sitting on this chase lounge, this very nicely comfortable looking tufted lounge. And then you have the ceiling fan sort of dropping down. This is another one of those paintings that I did the bird's eye technique, where it's basically a camera from the top looking straight down onto the proceedings. And so I remember painting this one. I had fun with it with the lighting technique, I remember. But long story short, Justin, I think he owns this one now. I remember he wanted it, so he bought it, and I'm grateful for that. And a lot of my friends actually bought these. My other friend Tamam owns this one, I believe. But
Nice.
anyway, okay, so that's shrink wrapped. And then from there, Empire State Building, he's getting it together, right? Like he's picking up the pieces of his life. So he's going to go back to work, right? So here you have in this one called Domestic New York, Monday morning, 8 a.m. from 2016. You have Empire State. He's got his business tie on, he's got his hat on, and he's got his briefcase, and he's braving the elements and he's walking to work. This this sort of signifies for me, how I used to get to work. My commute over there. I used to work on 38th and 8th in
Mm-hmm.
an architecture office, and that's right near Times Square. So it wasn't exactly the quietest and cleanest area in the world, Daniel, right? It was quite the opposite.
Really.
Um, it was loud. There was debris in the sewer main, right? The sewer vents. There was smoking, like everyone smoked. It was kind of annoying. I think in retrospect, I look back on it with like rose-colored glasses. But so I tried to capture that energy, that intensity of just walking to work in this painting, right? So you have cigarettes flying everywhere. You have taxis and sort of garbage trucks, right, flying around. You have a giant exaggerated honk, right? So the horns are blaring. The trash is everywhere. So uh, it was a very hectic commute. That's why usually I would get breakfast nearby
First.
work. Yes, just to sort of say, all right. Um, but here we have Empire State Building. At least he's trying to get back into the routine, right? Okay, so next, roses never lie. So
Oh
so
wow.
while Empire State Building is getting his life back together, um, Chrysler Building, what's going on with her, right? So here she is, sort of sitting in this Art Deco space. The chair itself, I remember it's sort of like a custom design. Um, I'm thinking to myself, if Chrysler Building's going to sit in a chair, what would the chair look like? And it's got these Art Deco elements to it. It's got this ornament, those finials. These are called finials at the top of the chair. Those are based on designs that are on the actual Chrysler Building. But here she is, sort of in full view, sitting and noticing on this table here another dead rose. Um, and then on the back on the wall, I have the Domestic New York, um, a towering romance, right? So the first painting that we saw today, so the first of that last set is once again shown here. And it's this idea, it goes back to this concept album idea where things are moving in cyclical fashion. So things repeat, right? So if track one Um, Here, let me go back. If track one of the album is this piece,
Yes.
right, and I've got a final track on the album, then I should sort of um, echo track one in some way, right? And
Oh,
so
nice.
yeah, so that's why I have that first painting in this one as well. In the last, this is the second to last painting, but in that set of 10, you have a sort of cyclical repeat, right, happening. So it works sort of like in a loop. Um, and on the left, I have, three, eligible bachelors. Um, these are very generic New York buildings, but they're each holding, beautifully alive roses, right? They're trying to woo Chrysler Building, but for some reason she keeps looking at this dead rose and the memories, the painting on the wall, and she's starting to have second thoughts. And so, if you look at those 10 as they were, um, if I left it there, I think, as a viewer, you would probably determine that eventually those two end up back together. Um, and so that's kind of how it was for 3 years. I sort of left it there. These paintings were exhibited in a couple venues throughout New York. Um, if we have time, we can look at those photos of the show. But it was kind of cool to see them all sort of displayed together. Um, but then what happened was, fast forward to 2019, and I recently I applied to exhibit my work in another show in Queens, New York, at LaGuardia Community College. So I submitted some paintings, and then I got selected, right? And so I was able to exhibit those 10 paintings once again, right before I left. So I left in 2019. I moved away from New York, but before I did, I had this show. So this show was up even when I was not there anymore. So I had to fly back a few months later and pick up some of the pieces. Um, but I wanted to sort of commemorate this. This is my last sort of big statement while I was living in New York City, right? And so I wanted to create one more painting, part of that series, and it would sort of answer this question of whether or not the Chrysler and Empire State get together again, after what we had just seen. And so I just said, you know what, the hell with it. Let's bring them back together, right? And so I create in 2019 this one, the Domestic New York, the Bed of Roses. Um,
Nice.
and yeah, and this one I really, it's kind of like, this is my sort of farewell letter to New York while I was there. And so I really gave it my all. Again, the roses are front and center here, right? I create this rosescape, this very abstracted environment. So you have rose petals, you've got a rose carpet, you've got the rose bed and pillows, and then a blanket of roses covering the buildings, and here they are reunited, right? So it's almost like a fantasy scene, right? They're finally like together again. You've got this very dramatic spotlight sort of hitting them, so each one has an extra sort of glare, an extra glow to them. They're so in love, right? They've rekindled everything. Um, and I remember right before I painted this, I took it as like divine intervention, because I was walking around Harlem. uh, I lived I lived with my roommates. We lived on 142nd Street and Broadway, which is in Harlem. And I remember one day walking outside, on the sidewalk was a rose petal. It was just a random rose petal somebody must have bought for someone, and the rose petal dropped. And I picked it up and I kept it, and I was using it as creative inspiration, right? And then I was in Brooklyn one day, and in the trees, somebody threw a bunch of flowers out of an apartment, and they landed in the trees. And so one of those flowers was a rose, and it was actually this rose that you see here. And so I took that rose with the stem, and this sounds crazy, but I still have that rose. I mean, it's like a shriveled up thing now, but I still have the physical um, rose that I found in New York, and I took that as a sign, right? And then, it's even more poetic, I thought, that the rose is the symbol of New York. The rose is the state flower. So that was it, right? I'm like, all right, let's make this piece. So I completed it in 2019 in time for that final show that I had been a part of in LaGuardia Community College in Queens, New York. I was really happy with this one. I think it sort of put that final stamp on the whole series for me. The reason why I retired this series after that was, number one, I did 57 of them, right? So how many more, how many more did I need to do?
Serious, yes.
Right? I mean, I think I said everything I needed to say with this series, but I think this was such a just very appropriate way to end the series, to end it in New York, to leave New York for Arizona, knowing that these paintings were still being displayed there while I was gone, for me felt like a feeling of I I don't know. I had made it.
A legacy.
Yeah, something like
Uh,
that, right? Like I went there for a reason, for a purpose, and I think that I had achieved what I wanted to do. Um,
Certainly.
yeah, so
Totally
so I was
agree.
like, great. Um,
Yes. You're
so
great,
yes.
Mr. Saul. And
Well, I
thank
don't
you.
know about that.
Yes, you are. Thank you so much for
Thanks.
sharing your painting to the world. And we are encouraging you to do more and more and more series like this to come. So, to wrap up our discussion for today, how do you decide on the size and scale for all your paintings?
Well, for those 11, the 20-inch by 20-inch, they needed to be square. The reason for that was sort of based on a record, an album cover, like a record album, is usually a square-shaped thing. Um, and that was the main reason why those had to be 20 by 20, because I wanted square-shaped ones. I wanted each one to be, parts to a whole, parts to an entire story. Again, that concept album idea, the Stations of the Cross, right, where each one is the same dimension. So they had to be square. I was like very adamant about making them square shaped.
Definitely amazing, Mr. Sal.
Did I
Well,
pass? No.
yes, indeed, you passed all those greatness paintings of yours. So,
Thank you.
as I said, please do continue doing it. Make a series, and let's empower the world through your painting.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for allowing me to share these with everyone.
No worries. So, people, let's support Mr. Sal Cosenza. Where do people say visit your art? What
Oh,
is your website?
just my website, salcosenza.com. You'll see those poems. You'll get to explore each painting that we talked about, and you can reach out to me with questions or show us what you're working on.
Yes, we will encourage you to do something good to the world, people like us.
Yes.
Like us, for sure. So, Mr. Sal, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Daniel, and thanks everyone. Have a great week.
Modicon people, see you soon.